In 1977, the quiet fishing village of Colares, Brazil, became the epicenter of one of the most terrifying UFO incidents ever documented. Beams of light tormented the villagers for 9 months, leaving burns, scars, and over 100 attacks, yet no one could explain why. The Brazilian military launched Operation Saucer to investigate, but when the mission ended, the files were classified and the truth was buried. Decades later, the lead investigator broke his silence, only to die under mysterious circumstances. What did he uncover? What were those lights? And who would go to such lengths to keep it hidden? Colares is a small fishing village in northern Brazil, near the Amazon River. For years, life here was simple and peaceful. But in the late 1977, everything changed. Bright lights started appearing in the sky above the village, and they weren't like anything people had ever seen before. The lights were incredibly bright, red, blue, white, and they seemed to move with a purpose. Some villagers said the lights hovered silently over their homes, casting shadows that felt alive. Others described the light zipping across the sky, stopping suddenly, almost like they were scanning the ground. Imagine this. It's late at night. The air is humid, thick with the scent of salt and the quiet murmur of waves against the shore. You're sitting outside your small wooden home. The jungle behind you, alive with the sound of crickets and distant howls. It's a night like any other, until you see it. Maria, a local villager, described one of her encounters. She had been gathering water from the well just a few meters from her home. She was tired from the long day, but grateful for the coolness of the evening air. Suddenly, a faint hum filled the silence. At first she thought it was the wind, but then the noise grew louder, almost mechanical, like something vibrating in the sky above her. When Maria looked up, she froze. Hovering just above the treetops was a glowing light, so bright it made her squint. It wasn't like the stars, it was alive. It pulsed, changed colors from red to blue to white, and then it moved, deliberate, slow, lowering itself closer to her. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The light felt overwhelming, pressing down on her like it was watching her, judging her. Then without a warning, a beam shot out. She described it as a thin, bright line of energy that hit her shoulder. She dropped her bucket and fell to the ground, clutching the spot where the beam struck. It burned, sharp, searing, like fire piercing her skin. Maria says she could feel her energy draining, her strength slipping away. Her legs were too weak to stand. She could hear her heart pounding in her ears, every bit louder than the last. When the light finally retreated, she was left trembling, too weak to move. Her shoulders had strange marks, 2 small punctures surrounded by a burn that looked nothing like a regular wound. It wasn't until the next morning that her family found her, curled up near the well, barely conscious. So these weren't just strange lights in the sky, they were dangerous. Beams of light shot down from the orbs, leaving burns and strange puncture marks on people's bodies. Maria's story wasn't unique. Over 100 incidents in just a few months. The villagers were terrified, desperate. They started calling the lights chupa chupa or suck suck because they believed the beams were draining their energy or their blood.
Assim, espantado, o que foi? E foi? Aí ela disse assim, aí quando eu olhei assim a casa cheia de gente, né, eu perguntei o que foi, o que é que tá acontecendo? Aí ela disse assim, olha, o chupa-chupa te chupou. Aí os pessoal começaram a botar a lamparina pra ver, né? Aí ficou uma roda aqui. Ficou uma roda bem aqui no meu pescoço, sabe? Aqui. Aí eu fiquei assim que eu queria me levantar assim pra andar e não conseguia, sabe? Nessa noite eu não dormi mesmo. Aí o povo de lá não dormiu mesmo. Aí só via negócio de tiro pra cima, pá, pá, porque muita gente viu, sabe? Pelo ali que eu queria dormir e não...
For them, it wasn't just a mystery. It was a fight for survival. As the attacks continued, panic spread throughout the village. Some packed up their lives and fled to nearby towns, hoping to escape the lights. Others stayed behind. They lit fires around their homes, used mirrors to reflect the beams, and stayed up all night, keeping watch. But no matter what they did, the lights always came back. For those who stayed, it felt like an unwinnable battle. Doctors began documenting the injuries. Burns that didn't match anything they'd ever seen before. Puncture wounds that left people weak and exhausted. Many victims described extreme fatigue, like the lights were draining their strength. To the villagers, it felt like they were being attacked by something completely beyond their understanding. The village began to split. They didn't know what to believe. Some thought the lights were a divine punishment, a warning from the heavens. Others whispered that it was the government, experimenting on them like lab rats. And then there were those like Maria, who believed the lights weren't from this world. Despite their fear, a few villagers tried to make sense of it all. They noticed patterns. The lights appear mostly at night. They targeted people who were alone. And they made the faint, mechanical humming sound just before striking. These observations, though chilling, didn't make anyone feel safer. The attacks continued, and each night became a test of survival. By November of 1977, life in Colares had become unbearable. Entire families abandoned their homes, retreating into the jungle or seeking safety in the nearby towns. Those who stayed tried everything: prayers, rituals, even crude barriers to block the lights. Nothing worked. The lights kept coming, and the villagers felt trapped. The fear and the desperation of the villagers were undeniable, and eventually their cries for help reached the Brazilian government, forcing them to take action. In September 1977, the Brazilian Air Force launched Operation Saucer in response to the escalating panic in Colares. For the villagers, this was a glimmer of hope, but for the military it was something far more serious, a matter of national security. The mission, led by Captain Urangi Holanda, was unlike anything the Air Force had done before. Over 4 months, Holanda and his team collected over 500 pages of reports, took hundreds of photographs, and filmed 16 hours of video footage. Now I'll be honest, as the military stepped in, reports and investigation were documented, but most of what they found never saw the light of day. And trust me, I've looked. Finding authentic visuals or photos have been next to impossible. Most of the original files are either locked away or lost. The lights weren't random. They hovered over specific homes, followed individuals, and occasionally seemed to respond to human movement. Soldiers described an eerie sense of being watched, almost as if the lights had an intelligence of their own. One soldier recounted an incident where a light followed their patrol for nearly an hour, keeping just out of reach. Another described beams that lit up the jungle with an intensity that seemed impossible. These weren't natural phenomena, Holanda concluded. Whatever they were, they defied all conventional explanation. Despite their meticulous documentation, Operation Saucer was abruptly shut down in early 1978. Officially, the lights were dismissed as natural phenomena, things like ball lightning or atmospheric plasma. But many within the operation, including Holanda himself, believed this explanation was nothing more than a cover-up. What if the military wasn't just investigating the lights? What if they were covering up something far more unsettling? Holanda's doubts did not stay quiet for long. For 2 decades, the findings of Operation Saucer remained hidden from public view. Holanda decided to break his silence. In a series of interviews, he revealed the shocking truth about what he believed the lights were and why the operation was shut down. In his own words, Holanda said,
E para os militares de permanência aeronáutica que sabem que existem esses documentos e que a população tem o direito de conhecê-los, eu não acho que vai ficar aqui barato, eu não acho que esses documentos deveriam ser liberados para o público. Aí vem a decisão de comando. Eu acho que, a minha opinião, é aquela que se diz, se abrir, se disser, logo em seguida vem outras perguntas que o Ministério da Aeronáutica, o governo brasileiro não tem resposta. Para evitar esse constrangimento, não se fala nada. Uma vez eu estava assistindo o Flávio Cavalcante, um interrogatório sobre isso, um cara perguntou, que essa coisa, tá? Por que eles não pousam no Maracanã para todo mundo ver? E aconteceu um caso desse, um pouso na esplanada do Planalto, aí não tem jeito. Tá? O que eu acredito é que em futuro próximo, bem próximo, e possa ser até um pouco mais abusado do que eu estou te dizendo, não chega a 2 anos, esse evento vai acontecer. Dentro de 1 ano e meio a 2 anos, esse evento vai acontecer. Contato claro, aberto, todas as televisões do mundo, TNN, Globo, todo mundo dentro. Isso deve acontecer dentro de um futuro bem próximo.
This interview, over an hour and a half long, is both fascinating and deeply unsettling. Holanda doesn't just recount the events, he reveals how they haunted him even years later. Holanda stated that the official explanation provided to the public, a dismissal of the lights as natural phenomena, was a lie. He described the lights as intelligent, highly advanced, and likely extraterrestrial. Holanda shared accounts of direct encounters during the operation, including moments when lights appeared to observe soldiers or react to their actions.
A mais ou menos uns 2.000 metros, passou, vinha da esquerda, do norte para sul, cruzando o rio, uma luz muito forte, amarela, âmbar, como um sol, mas muito baixo, em cima das árvores, e cruzou o rio na mesma posição, mais ou menos, onde fica a casa do vigia, onde eu tinha visto a primeira coisa.
The captain also confirmed that the injuries reported by the villagers were consistent with the light's behavior during the investigation.
Algumas, principalmente mulheres, no seio esquerdo, uma marca, como se fosse 2 furos de agulha, tá? E em torno, uma mancha castanha, como se fosse uma queimadura de iodo, tá? As pessoas diziam que tinham sido sugadas, o sangue tinha sido sugado, uma parte daquela pequena sangue tinha sido retirada. Então, passaram a apelidar de chupa-chupa por causa desse fato. Porque uma luz vinha e incidia sobre a pessoa, e normalmente as mulheres do seio esquerdo, homens no braço, na perna. Qual era a proporção? Quantas mulheres para quantos homens? Mais ou menos 8 para 10, em 10, 8 mulheres. 10 para 8 mulheres. Mas vocês documentaram os efeitos físicos, as marcas, as pessoas, foi tudo documentado? Foi visto, foi analisado, foi visto por médico.
Unfortunately, I couldn't include the full interview here, but if you're interested, I've added the link in the description below. It's an essential watch if you want to go deeper into this mystery. The revelations reignited interest in the Colares incident, and for many, validated the fears and experiences of the villagers. But what happened just weeks after Holanda's interviews aired, no one could have predicted. He was found dead in his home under mysterious circumstances. Official reports listed his death as a suicide, but many questioned the timing and the lack of transparency surrounding the investigation. But was it? The timing was too strange, too perfect for many to believe. Was Holanda's silence for revealing too much? Or did the weight of the mystery finally become too much for him to bear? The circumstances of his death added another layer to an already baffling case. Holanda's revelations opened the floodgates for researchers and skeptics alike. UFO enthusiasts pointed to his testimony as proof of extraterrestrial involvement, while critics accused him of fabricating stories to gain attention. But one thing remained clear. Operation Saucer had uncovered something extraordinary, something the Brazilian military wasn't ready to share with the world. Was the truth hidden to protect us? Or was it buried to cover up something we're not ready yet to face? So here's the big question. What were the lights over Colares, and why did they seem to attack people? This is the kind of mystery that just won't let you go. The more you think about it, the more questions you have. And trust me, there's no shortage of theories. Some make you go, that could work, and others are just plain wild. Let's break it all down and see where we land. Let's start with the theory that sticks with me the most. aliens. I'll admit it, I've always found this idea fascinating, and in this case, it actually makes a lot of sense. Captain Hollanda himself, the man leading the investigation, said the lights seemed intelligent. They weren't just floating around randomly, they moved with purpose, reacting to people and situations as if they were alive. Here's what's even more compelling: the injuries the lights left behind. We're talking about burns, puncture marks, and extreme fatigue, symptoms that don't match anything natural or even man-made. Some researchers believe the beams of light could have been a way for aliens to gather data, maybe even biological samples. Think about it, if you wanted to study humans without getting too close, wouldn't a remote fishing village like Colares be the perfect place? And it's not just the injuries. People in Colares describe feeling a sense of dread before the lights even appeared, almost like they were being watched. Could that be some kind of psychological manipulation? Or maybe the lights were emitting frequencies that affected how people felt? It's creepy to think about it, but it makes the whole case even more fascinating. Here's something else to consider. Why would the lights target specific people? They didn't just strike at random. They seemed to pick their targets carefully, almost as if they were testing different variables. The kind of behavior feels deliberate and very alien. I can't shake the feeling that these lights were something otherworldly. The way they moved, the injuries they left, it all feels too deliberate, too precise. What else could it be? Now let's look at a theory that feels a little bit more grounded: advanced military technology. Some people think the lights were experimental drones or weapons being tested in secret. And I'll admit there's some logic to this. The Brazilian military got involved pretty quickly, and they took the whole thing very seriously. They spent months investigating, collected hundreds of pages of reports, and then classified everything. But here's where it gets tricky. If this was military tech, why test it on civilians? Why target an isolated village instead of a controlled environment? Or why go to such lengths to cover it up? And let's talk about the behavior of the lights. Even the most advanced drones we have today don't act like this. The lights seem to anticipate people's movements, almost like they were thinking. Could a drone in the 1970s really be that advanced? Maybe, but it's hard for me to imagine. Here's another angle. What if the military wasn't just testing their own tech? What if they encountered something they couldn't explain, something extraterrestrial, and decided to keep it quiet? It wouldn't be the first time we heard stories about governments covering up UFOs. This theory leaves a lot of unanswered questions, but it's worth considering. Could the military have been involved? Sure, but were they the ones behind the lights? I'm not so sure. Then there's the idea that the lights were a natural phenomena. Some skeptics suggest things like ball lightning or atmospheric plasma, rare events that can create glowing orbs of light. And I'll admit, nature can be pretty strange sometimes. But here's the problem: natural phenomena don't target people. Ball lightning doesn't hover over houses or leave behind puncture marks. And it definitely doesn't stick around for months, showing up night after night in the same place. Maybe there were unique atmospheric conditions in Colares that made the lights possible. But even if that is true, it doesn't explain the injuries or the intelligence behind the lights. If this was a natural event, it feels like there was something or someone controlling it. Finally, there's the idea that this was all just mass hysteria. The argument is that the villagers were so scared they started imagining things or exaggerating what they saw. And yeah, fear can definitely mess with your mind, but let's be real, mass hysteria doesn't leave physical evidence. It doesn't leave burns or scars, and it doesn't drain your energy. It definitely doesn't make the military spend months investigating and classifying their findings. If this was all in people's heads, why did the government take it so seriously? I think it's safe to say that something very real happened in Colares. The question is, what? If you ask me, I think the truth might be a mix of all these theories. Maybe the lights were a natural phenomena, but someone, like the military or even aliens, was using them. Or maybe the lights were extraterrestrial, and the military just didn't know how to handle it. What I keep coming back to is the behavior of the lights. They weren't random. They moved with purpose, they targeted people, and they left behind real injuries. That doesn't feel like something we can easily explain. But that's just my take. What about you? If this happened in your town, how would you react? Would you think it was aliens, secret military tech, something else entirely? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear your theories. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to also watch our latest on the Atlov Pass, you can see the link right here. Also make sure to subscribe, share and like this video with your friends so we can continue making these kind of videos. Until the next time, keep the good vibes and spread the love. RPDC, signing out.